The Yakuza series, now known as the Like a Dragon series, has slowly become one of my favorite video game franchises ever since I first encountered Yakuza 0 all the way back in 2018. I was drawn to this series for all the usual reasons: the iconic characters, the outlandish stories, and the almost unnecessarily complex minigames. When the franchise is at its strongest, it's easily one of the best experiences video games can provide. Of course, that doesn't mean the games are without their flaws. The stories do have a flair for the melodramatic, and sometimes go in directions that are completely baffling. In my opinion, the one aspect of Like a Dragon stories that are consistently underwhelming is its romances, and that's not an opinion that is unique to me. Don't get me wrong, Like a Dragon can tell a good love story when it wants to. The problem is that it doesn't necessarily always want to. That's not really a problem. It's not like every story has to have a romance, but RGG Studio, for all of their talents and abilities, keep trying to push one into their games despite their dismal track record. It's bad enough that when hints of a romance between Ichiban and Saiko started showing up in promotional material for Infinite Wealth, I started getting worried. I liked Saiko a lot in the last game, and hearing that she had become a love interest sent alarm bells off in my head. To understand where my worries were coming from, you really have to start at the beginning, with the first Yakuza game. One of the first game's major characters is Yumi, a childhood friend of main character Kazuma Kiryu, and essentially the love of his life. That's a connection the game makes a big show of telling us about, but unfortunately it doesn't give the character enough weight in the story to make it mean anything to us. Yumi disappears after the opening act, and it isn't until the very end of the game that we or Kiryu even see her again. By that point, you've spent about 20 hours or more fighting, gaming, or going to hostess clubs, and hardly any time talking about Yumi. So even though the final scenes of the game are rather sad, I can't really say that I was all that invested. It's especially appalling in Kiwami, which made a big deal of expanding on Nishiki's backstory while not giving Yumi any more of the spotlight. Makes you wonder which relationship ends up being more important in the long run, doesn't it? Yakuza 2 tries its own hand with romance with Kaoru Sayama, a police detective who crosses paths with Kiryu. This time around, the two characters spend a lot more time together, so when their relationship does turn to romance, it's a lot more believable. Does that make it a good love story? One that deserves praise compared to others in the franchise? It doesn't really matter, because Yakuza 3 opens up by tossing their romance out of the window and exiling Sayama to the States. These two examples alone do a pretty good job of making me wary of any possible romance plotlines that might crop up in a Yakuza game. But the most ludicrous romance subplot has to be the one involving the character of Mayumi in Yakuza 5. Mayumi is a side character who appears in Kiryu's section of the game. She lives with him and is later revealed to have feelings for him as well. The problem is that Mayumi is a very minor character who hardly shows up in the story, and her relationship with Kiryu is so non-existent that it's not even worth it to him to say anything when her feelings are revealed. I know that Mayumi is meant to be a much smaller character than either Yumi or Sayama, but the question remains, why even mention being in love in the first place? It wouldn't change the story in the slightest, and it all feels like Mayumi being in love is just to make sure Kiryu has some kind of love interest, even though he did just fine without one the last couple of games. It reminds me of Bond girls who would just show up to be love interests for James Bond, only to disappear once the movie was over, never to be mentioned again. Of course, the question pops up of why this happens so often in Like a Dragon games anyhow. Personally, I think it's because of all the sexy minigames and activities RGG Studio likes to put in their games. The hostess dating minigame is one pretty common example, but there are always tons of similar games that exist throughout the franchise's history. And let's be honest, we can accept a lot of shadiness and amorality from our Yakuza heroes, but we're always gonna feel a little scummy about playing a bit of titillating ping pong when we're supposed to have a girlfriend waiting at home. RGG can and has made games without these sorts of activities, of course, but they clearly want them in the game. And even the last one had Ichiban hitting up strip clubs and going online dating despite still technically pining after Saiko. I think this is why Like a Dragon's approach to romance is one that is easily disposable. You can enjoy it in the moment, but it's hard to guarantee that it will really matter to the franchise's long-running narrative. I kind of get the sense that RGG Studio understands that it's trying to have its cake and eat it too, and I don't envy the position they're put in, but at the same time, they kind of do it to themselves. The next mainline Like a Dragon game has every chance of proving me wrong, of course, and while I'd love to see it do that, I expect the actual outcome will be a little less surprising. At this point, we do have to ask ourselves a question. Do we even need romance in a Like a Dragon game to begin with? The game's stories are enjoyable regardless of whether or not Kiryu or Ichiban has a love interest, and nearly every time they do it, I never see much in the way of positive reception. They've gone without romance plenty of times before, and there's really no reason they couldn't keep doing that. I really liked Infinite Wealth. It's definitely one of the best Like a Dragon games, but the romance genuinely does nothing for it aside from a couple of fun scenes, and I feel the game overall could have been a bit better by leaving it out. Instead, I find myself looking towards that hypothetical Like a Dragon 9 with trepidation, worried about how they'll handle Ichiban's tenuous romantic relationship with Saiko. I can't say they'll definitely mishandle it the way they handled Sayama in 3, but the fact that it's even worth worrying about tells leagues about Like a Dragon's history with love stories. I do feel like I'm being a little unfair. It's not as if everything about Ichiban and Saiko in Infinite Wealth was terrible, and hey, the two of them had enough of a rapport in the last game that it doesn't feel that unnatural for them to be romantically interested in each other. I also don't want to paint the picture that RGG Studio is completely incapable of putting out a good romance. I think the story between Goro Majima and Makoto Makimura in Yakuza 0 was amazing, for example, and it's still one of the few love stories a majority of the fans seem to appreciate. It helps that it was sort of a doomed love story to begin with, meaning they never had to commit to having Makoto come back. But at the same time, it developed Majima's relationship with Makoto in a way other love interests never got. If RGG Studio can make another love story on the level as that one, then I'd gladly welcome it. Otherwise, I'd rather they focus on other things. Thanks for watching. I think romance in the Like a Dragon series is something generally regarded as hit or miss, but feel free to let me know if you agree or disagree. If you have a love story in the franchise you think is particularly good, please let me know in the comments below. Subscribe if you want to see more of my videos, and I'll see you next time.